"You will find," said Sir Hugo Marsh, spreading his fat hands upon the table, "that I am a reasonable man, your grace. The debt is £12,000. I cannot pay it, but I can pay it." He smiled, and the smile made the Duke of Harmsworth want to strike him. "The girl is my ward. She is comely, well-bred, and entirely at my disposal. Take her, and the debt is cancelled between us. A gentleman's arrangement." The Duke of Harmsworth did not answer at once. He had come to this crumbling manor at the far edge of his lands on a raw November evening to collect a debt of £12,000, a debt Sir Hugo Marsh had run up against the late Duke's estate through a decade of gaming and worse, and which now, with the old Duke dead and the new one determined to set the dukedom's affairs in order, had come due. Harmsworth had expected excuses. He had expected pleading. He had not expected to be offered a woman across a supper table like a settlement of plate. "You will explain yourself," he said. His voice was very quiet. Those who knew Alaric, Duke of Harmsworth, knew that the quiet voice was the dangerous one. Sir Hugo did not know him well. "Come, your grace, you take my meaning perfectly." Sir Hugo poured himself more wine. "She is no blood of mine, a distant connection, her parents dead, her fortune long since," he coughed, "administered. She has cost me a decade in keep and given nothing back. A duke wants a wife. Or if not a wife, the smile again, a duke wants what a duke wants, and who is to gainsay him? She is yours. I ask only your written discharge of the 12,000, and we are quits, and everyone is satisfied." "Everyone," said the Duke. "Everyone who signifies," Sir Hugo agreed comfortably. Alaric set down his glass untouched. Rage was moving in him, cold and enormous, but he had spent 38 years learning to govern it. And he governed it now because he had understood in an instant that if he let it loose, the person it would fall hardest upon was not the man across the table. "Send for her," he said. "Your grace." "The girl, your ward, send for her. I will not conclude a bargain over a person I have not seen. Send for her." Sir Hugo, mistaking this entirely, beamed and rang the bell. She came a few minutes later, and the moment she entered the low, candle-lit room, the Duke of Harmsworth understood three things at once, the way a man understands the ground giving way beneath him. The first was that she was beautiful, not in the loud, painted way of the women who were thrown at him in London, but quietly, gravely, like a face in an old painting. She was perhaps 22, slight, in a gown of good cloth long out of fashion and much let out and taken in over the years of a growing girl who was never given anything new. Her hair was fair and simply dressed. Her hands were folded before her. The second thing he understood was that she knew. She knew exactly what was being transacted in this room. He saw it in the terrible stillness of her, in the way she did not look at Sir Hugo and did not look at the Duke either, but at a point on the wall above his head, holding herself upright by main force, the way a soldier holds himself upright to be flogged. No one had told her in words, perhaps. She had not needed to be told. She had understood the whole shape of her life in the moment the bell rang and she was sent for, and she had walked into the room to be sold, and she had decided, visibly, that she would at least be sold with her spine straight. And the third thing the Duke of Harmsworth understood, and this was the thing that would change everything, that would remake his whole hard-governed life, was that he would sooner have burned the £12,000 and the manor and himself along with it than let one hair of her head be harmed by the bargain Sir Hugo Marsh had just proposed. "Your name," he said. He heard his own voice come out gentler than he had known it could. Her eyes came to his gray-green, steady, though he could see the pulse going hard in her throat. "Beatrice, your grace," she said. "Beatrice Ainsley." A small pause. "You need not ask my name if it makes the thing easier. I understand what I am here for." The candles guttered. Sir Hugo laughed, delighted. "You see, your grace, sensible girl, no fuss. She'll give you no trouble at all." "Be silent," said the Duke of Harmsworth. He did not raise his voice, but something in the room changed so completely that Sir Hugo's laugh died in his throat, and the fat hands went still upon the table, and the candles seemed to lean. Alaric rose. He was very tall, and in the low room he seemed taller, and Sir Hugo, looking up at him, went slowly the color of tallow. "Miss Ainsley," the Duke said, without taking his eyes off her guardian, You will fetch your cloak and any small thing you cannot bear to leave, and you will wait for me in the hall. You are leaving this house tonight. You are not being sold. There is no bargain here, and there never was. Do you understand me?" Beatrice did not move. She was staring at him now, the wall forgotten, and on her still white face was an expression he would remember to the end of his days. Not relief, not yet, she did not dare relief, but a wild, disbelieving flicker of it, quickly caged, the look of a creature that has been in a trap so long it cannot trust the open door. "Your Grace," she whispered, "I do not." "You are not property," said the Duke of Harmsworth, "to be handed over a supper table. Not to me, not to any man. Whatever this house has taught you, that is a lie. Now go and fetch your cloak." She went, and Alaric turned the full weight of his quiet on Sir Hugo Marsh. The drive back to Harmsworth Hall took the better part of 3 hours, through the black November night, and for the whole of it the girl sat across from him in the swaying carriage and did not speak, and did not sleep, and did not once take her frightened eyes off him. The Duke of Harmsworth understood the look. He had seen it on the faces of prisoners. In the war, the look of a creature that has been handed from one power to another, and does not yet know whether the new power will prove kinder than the old, and dares not hope it, because hope is the thing that hurts. He did nothing to earn the look and nothing to dispel it. He only kept to his own side of the carriage and kept his hands still and visible, and said once quietly, "There is a rug there at your feet if you are cold. You need not ask." And she took it after a long while and drew it over her knees and watched him still. Near midnight, when the lights of the hall showed at last through the trees, she spoke. "You will want something," she said. Her voice was low and steady and terribly reasonable. "Men always want something. My guardian wanted his debt cancelled. You have not cancelled it. I heard you say so through the door, so you want something else. I would rather know what it is now, your Grace, tonight, than lie awake guessing. I have found the guessing is always worse than the thing." Alaric was quiet a moment. It was, he thought, the most heartbreaking sentence he had heard in years, not the words, but the flat, practiced calm of them. The voice of a woman who had learned that everything had a price and had decided the only dignity left to her was to name the price early and not flinch. "I want you to sleep tonight without fear," he said. "That is the whole of what I want, and I am aware it is the one thing I cannot give you by wanting it, because fear does not take orders. So I will give you the next best thing, which is a locked door. Your room at the hall locks from the inside. The key will be yours and no one else's, mine least of all. No one will enter it whom you do not admit. Not I, not any servant, not anyone ever. You may lock the world out of that room and keep it out as long as you live under my roof, which may be as long as you wish." He looked at her across the dark carriage. "I want nothing from you, Miss Ainsley. I know you will not believe that tonight. I do not ask you to. I ask only that you test it, that you lock the door and find it holds, and lock it again tomorrow, and the day after, until one morning you find you have forgotten to, because you no longer think of it. That is all the wanting I have. And if that day never comes, then you shall keep the key all your life, and it will still be yours, and I will count the bargain kept." She stared at him, and for the first time the practiced calm cracked just slightly, and something raw showed through it, not gratitude. She did not dare gratitude yet, but a wild, frightened bewilderment, the look of a person handed a thing so far outside their experience that they cannot find the shape of it. "Why?" she whispered. "You keep, there is no why that makes sense. No one does a thing for nothing." "Then let it be the first thing you have ever been given for nothing," said the Duke of Harmsworth, "and let it teach you that such things exist, though I know it will take more than one night's teaching. Here is the hall. Mrs. Faraday will have your room ready. She is a kind woman and asks no questions. Go up, Miss Ainsley. Lock your door. Sleep if you can. And in the morning, if you are able, come down to breakfast, and no one will ask anything of you but whether you take tea or chocolate." She did lock the door that night. He knew, because he passed along the passage very late, not to listen, only because his own room lay that way, and he heard the key turn hard in the lock twice, and then a third time as if to be sure. And then, after a long silence, the sound quickly stifled of a woman weeping into a pillow in a locked room, safe for perhaps the first time in a decade, and undone by the safety. The Duke of Harmsworth stood in the dark passage of his own house and listened to it, and did not go to the door, though everything in him wished to, and clenched his hands at his sides, and swore, silently, a soldier's oath, that whatever it cost him and however long it took, the woman behind that door would one day sleep in his house with the door unlocked and unafraid, or he would die in the attempting. Then he went to his own room and did not sleep either, and in the morning he came down to breakfast and found her already there, pale and rigid at the far end of the table, having come down, as he had asked, though it plainly cost her everything she had. "Tea," he said gently to the footman, "and chocolate both, and let Miss Ainslie choose." And she chose chocolate in a whisper and drank it with both hands around the cup as though for the warmth, and did not look at him, but she had come down, and she had come down, and it was, the Duke of Harmsworth thought, watching her without seeming to, the most hopeful thing he had seen in a very long while. "You will hear me, Marsh," the Duke said, "and you will hear me exactly once. The debt of £12,000 stands, every farthing. I release you from nothing. You will pay it, or I will have the law strip this house to the wainscot, and I will see to it personally that every gaming club and every honest household between here and London knows what you offered me across your own supper table tonight. You attempted to sell a gentlewoman under your protection to settle your losses. There is no drawing-room in England that will receive you when I have done. You are ruined, sir. You ruined yourself the moment you rang that bell." He paused, and his voice dropped lower still. "And if I ever learn that you have pursued her, written to her, or spoken her name aloud, I will forget that I am a magistrate and remember that I was a soldier. Do we understand one another?" Sir Hugo Marsh, grey and shaking, understood. The Duke of Harmsworth took Beatrice Ainslie away from that house in his own carriage, in the rain, and she sat across from him in the dark with her cloak clutched to her throat and her small bundle in her lap, silent, rigid, watching him as one watches a fire that has not yet decided whether to warm or to consume. He did not speak. He understood. He had governed his own fear long enough to recognize another's, that anything he said now would be weighed by her for the price of it, and that the kindest thing he could do for a woman who had spent a decade learning that everything had a price was to ask nothing of her at all. He installed her at Harmsworth Hall in the care of his widowed cousin, Mrs. Faraday, a stout, warm, sensible woman who kept his house and asked no awkward questions and understood, when he said only, "She has been badly used. She is to want for nothing, and no one is to ask her for anything," precisely what he meant and precisely what he did not. And then he did the thing that undid Beatrice Ainslie more thoroughly than any cruelty had ever managed. He treated her as though she were priceless. She had come expecting to earn her keep, to be used, to pay in the only coin she had been taught she possessed. Instead, she was given a bright, warm room that looked over the park, and gowns, new ones, properly made, the first new things she had owned in 10 years, and books and quiet and the freedom of a great kind house, and nothing whatever was asked of her in return. The Duke was scrupulously, almost painfully correct. He did not come to her room. He did not touch her. He met her at dinner with Mrs. Faraday always present, and spoke to her of ordinary things, the weather, the estate, a book she was reading, and watched her gravely, learn by slow degrees to eat without flinching, to speak above a whisper, to sit in a chair without holding herself ready to be struck. It took weeks. He was patient. He had never, he found, been so patient about anything in his life. "Why?" she asked him at last one evening when Mrs. Faraday had nodded off over her needlework by the fire. Beatrice's gray-green eyes were fixed on him across the hearth, and there was, for the first time, something almost fierce in them. "Why did you do it? You could have taken me. It was offered. No one would have blamed you, no one who signifies," my guardian said. "You could have had me and your £12,000 both. Instead, you left the debt standing and took only the burden. A penniless girl with a ruined name and no dowry and no use to you. Why?" The Duke of Harmsworth looked into the fire for a long moment. He was not a man who spoke his heart. He had learned young that a heart spoken aloud was a heart handed to be broken. But he found he owed her the truth, this woman who had walked into a room to be sold and kept her spine straight. "When I was a boy," he said slowly, "my father sold my mother's happiness to buy his own comfort over and over, until there was nothing left of her but a kind of quiet that frightened me. She had folded her hands once exactly as you folded yours in that room, and looked at a point on the wall and let a thing be done to her that no one who loved her should ever have allowed. No one stopped it. There was no one to stop it. He met her eyes. I have spent my life since being the kind of man who stops it. That is the whole of the why, Miss Ainslie. When you folded your hands and looked at the wall, I saw my mother. And I discovered that I would sooner lose 12,000 pounds and my good name and my right hand than stand in a room and let it happen again. The fire ticked. Mrs. Faraday snored gently over her needlework. You are not a burden, the Duke said. You are not a debt or a settlement or a thing offered across a table. You are a woman who was wronged, and I have tried in my clumsy way to set one small corner of the world's cruelty right. That is all. You owe me nothing. You never did. He rose because he did not trust himself to sit any longer, and because there was something rising in his chest that he had no right to burden her with, not now, not while she was still learning that a kind man could exist without a hook hidden in the kindness. Good night, Miss Ainslie. But her voice stopped him at the door. Alaric, she said, his given name, which she had never used, which no one used, and he turned. She had risen too, and she stood by the fire with the firelight in her fair hair, and her face was no longer still and caged. It was open and afraid and alive. You are wrong about one thing, she said unsteadily. You said I owe you nothing. I owe you the whole of myself, not because you bought me, for you would not, but because you would not. Do you understand? I was handed to you as a thing, and you handed me back to myself as a person. There is no price for that. There is no coin in the world for that. And I find, her voice broke, I find I do not want it back. The self you gave me. I find I want to give it to you freely of my own will, which no one has ever let me use before. And I do not know how to say it more plainly than that because no one ever taught me how, so I am saying it badly, but I am saying it. I love you. Not out of gratitude, out of choosing. The first thing I have ever been permitted to choose. The Duke of Harmsworth stood in the doorway of his own drawing room and found that the heart he had guarded for 38 years, the heart he had never once handed to anyone to be broken, had walked out of his chest entirely and crossed the room to stand by the fire in a new gown, choosing him. The weeks turned, and the woman in the locked room learned by inches to unlock it. It was Mrs. Faraday who charted the progress and reported it in her comfortable way to the Duke, not because he asked, for he was too proud and too careful to ask, but because she was a shrewd woman and had seen at once how it stood with her cousin, and had decided in her own kindness to help him without letting either of them acknowledge that help was being given. She ate a good dinner today, Mrs. Faraday would remark over the chessboard of an evening. All of it. And she walked in the long gallery an hour looking at the pictures. She asked me who they all were. She has a great curiosity, that girl under the fright, a starved sort of curiosity, as if she had been kept from things. Or, she laughed today, Alaric, at the spaniel who fell in the fish pond, a real laugh before she remembered herself and stopped, but it was there. I heard it. And Alaric, moving his bishop, would say only, "Good," in a flat voice, and Mrs. Faraday would hide her smile behind her teacup, for she had known the Duke of Harmsworth all his life and had never once, in 38 years, seen him care whether a woman laughed. He was careful with Beatrice, so careful it was a discipline. He did not seek her out. He arranged instead to be findable, to be in the library at the hour she had taken to reading there, so that she might come or not come as she chose, and might leave when she chose, and might always find him occupied with his own affairs and requiring nothing of her. Slowly, over the weeks, she came more often than she stayed away. Slowly she began to speak, first only to answer, then to remark, then, one gray afternoon, to argue, warmly and at length, about a passage in a book they had both been reading, forgetting entirely to be afraid until the argument was half over, at which point she stopped, stricken, as if she had committed some terrible breach. "I beg your pardon," she said, going white. "I spoke too freely. I forgot myself. Miss Ainslie," the Duke set down his own book, "you have just told me with great heat and considerable justice that I have entirely mistaken the character of a man in a novel. You are correct. I had mistaken it. It is the first genuine disagreement anyone has offered me in this house in a year, everyone else being too afraid of me to disagree, and I found it the most refreshing quarter hour I have spent in months. Do not, I beg you, apologize for it. Do it again. Do it often. I have a great deal of money and a great deal of power and almost no one, in consequence, who will ever tell me I am wrong, and it is very bad for a man." He almost smiled. "You would be doing me a kindness. Consider it a duty of the house." She stared at him, and then, slowly, the stricken look faded, and something else came up under it, wondering and warm, and she said, half to herself, "You are the strangest man I have ever known. You threaten a room into silence and then beg a girl to contradict you." "I contain, I am told, a number of contradictions," said the Duke of Harmsworth gravely. "You are welcome to catalogue them. It will give you occupation." And she laughed, the real laugh Mrs. Faraday had heard, low and surprised, escaping her before she could catch it. And the Duke of Harmsworth, hearing it for himself for the first time, understood with sudden and total clarity that he was lost, that the careful discipline of his kindness had somewhere along the way stopped being duty and become need, and that the greatest danger to the woman he had rescued was no longer her guardian or the shameful bargain or the memory of the locked door, but the plain and inconvenient fact that the Duke of Harmsworth had fallen wholly and hopelessly in love with her, and did not know how a man in his position could ever say so to a woman in hers without seeming to demand, at last, the very payment he had sworn he would never take. So he said nothing, he guarded it as he guarded everything. And he went on being findable in the library, and losing arguments to her on purpose and sometimes in earnest, and watching her bloom by slow degrees from the rigid, folded-handed creature of the supper table into a woman with opinions and laughter and a starved curiosity being fed at last. And he told himself that this was enough, that to see her safe and growing was enough. That a man could live a long and useful life, on the ration of simply being in the same house as the thing he loved and asking nothing. He was wrong about that as it happened, but it took her to prove it to him. He crossed the room to her. Mrs. Faraday, it must be recorded, chose that exact moment to wake, take in the scene at a single shrewd glance, gather her needlework, and remove herself with a speed remarkable in a stout woman, murmuring something about her candle. "Beatrice," the Duke said. He took her hands, the folded hands, unfolded now, warm in his. "I have been afraid to speak, not of your refusal, of the opposite. I feared that if I told you what was in me, you would feel yourself bound to answer it, that you would mistake gratitude for love and give yourself again out of a sense that you owed it, and that I should have become, after all, no better than the man who tried to sell you. I could not bear to be that. So I resolved to say nothing ever, and to keep you safe and near and never touch what I most wanted, all my life if need be." He drew a breath that was not quite steady. "But you have said it first, and you have said it out of choosing, and choosing was the one thing I could never give you, you had to take it. So I am free to tell you now what I have known since the moment you walked into that room with your spine straight, and decided you would at least be sold with dignity. I loved you before I knew your name. I have loved you every quiet dinner since. Marry me, Beatrice Ainsley, not because you were given to me, because you have chosen me and I choose you, and there is no debt and no bargain and no price between us, and there never shall be again." She did not answer in words. She answered by lifting his hand and pressing her cheek to it, and then by letting him gather her against his heart, and they stood a long while in the firelight, the Duke and the woman who had been offered as a settlement of plate, neither of them any longer alone. They were married quietly, at Harmsworth in the new year, and the county, which had expected the cold, feared Duke of Harmsworth to marry an heiress, and was scandalized to learn he had married a penniless girl of no family with a ruined name, came to gawk and stayed to marvel. For there was no mistaking, when the two of them stood together at the altar, that here was a great love, and great love silences even the tongue in the end. As for Sir Hugo Marsh, the world dealt with him as the Duke had promised. The tale of what he had offered across his supper table got out, as such tales do. Whether the Duke breathed a word of it or not was never known and did not matter, for the truth of a man has a way of finding air. The gaming clubs closed their doors to him. The county turned its back. He was pressed for the £12,000 which he could not pay, and the crumbling manor was sold over his head, and he ended his days in a set of hired rooms in a seaside town, cut by everyone, dining alone. He had traded a gentlewoman for his comfort and had been left, in the end, with neither the gentlewoman nor the comfort nor his good name. Only the memory of a very tall, very quiet Duke rising from a supper table, and the ruin that had walked in with him. But that is a small and cold corner of the story, and it does not deserve the last word. The last word belongs to Harmsworth Hall in high summer, 3 years on, and to a bright, warm nursery wing that had stood empty and shrouded through 2 hard generations and stood empty no longer. The Duke of Harmsworth had governed his heart for 38 years and had believed until Beatrice that this was strength. He knew better now. He would come in from the estate of a golden evening and find her in the garden, his duchess, who had once folded her hands to be sold and now ordered the roses cut back with a firm and cheerful will. And a small figure would be running the length of the lawn toward him with unsteady flying steps, and a little hand would reach up for his, and Alaric, Duke of Harmsworth, would kneel down in the grass in his good coat and gather up the thing most precious in the world, and think that no man had ever been so far above his deserving. "You knelt in that supper room too," Beatrice said to him once, watching him rise from the lawn with a small, drowsy weight against his shoulder. "Not with your body, but you knelt. I saw it. A duke come to collect 12,000 pounds, and instead you laid the whole of your power down at the feet of a girl who had nothing and picked her up and asked nothing back. I did not understand it then. I thought there must be a hook in it somewhere. It took me a year to believe there was not." "There was a hook in it," the Duke admitted. "I only did not know it at the time. The hook was that I could not save you and remain untouched. I set out to give you back to yourself, and somewhere in the giving I gave you the whole of me as well and could not get it back and did not want to." He shifted the small sleeping weight higher on his shoulder. "You said there was no coin in the world for what I gave you. You were wrong, Beatrice. You paid it in full. You chose me. It is the only currency I have ever valued, and you are the only soul who ever spent it on me freely." She reached up and laid her hand against his jaw, the folded hand, unfolded these 3 years, and never once folded to be sold again. "Then we are quits, your grace," she said softly and smiled, "at last and forever, and no debt standing between us." "No debt," he agreed, and turned with his wife and his sleeping treasure toward the warm lights of the great house, and none ever again. And the sun went down gold over Harmsworth, and the roses she had ordered cut back bloomed the harder for it, and the girl who had been given away as a payment lived out her days as the most cherished woman in 3 counties, priceless, chosen, and free.